I'm from Huntington Beach, lifeguard tower 18 in particular, just south a little bit from the tower, between 18 and 16. No idea what happened to 17. My name's Kurt, and I'm going to read now from my book, Going Alone. A life of courage, joy, and what is it? Life of courage, joy, and something. I can't remember. Anyway, it's got a theme of some sort. This is my book. This is the life's work that I did. So it's all done. So my life's work is finished. So and my daughter's grown. So my life is essentially, for all intents and purposes, complete. All I've got to do now is just hang around a little longer to, I guess, enjoy the fruits of almost 60 years of effort. To be a good man and to be earnest and virtuous and get up early and go to bed soon and eat well and every once in a while come to the beach and read from my book. Because who knows, maybe this will do somebody some good. This is the fruit and the result of all my life of trying to figure out how to live well in spite of the universe apparently seeming to have no particular reason for being other than to propagate, to procreate, to make more copies of ourselves, to keep our genetic code moving forward one further generation and one further generation still. Optimally, you should stick around long enough to see your children have children, and then you can die and get the hell out of the way. In fact, it's important to die and get the hell out of the way because our job is done at that point, and we have to make space for the new stuff that's coming up. With that in mind, I'm going to read from the chapter titled, My God is a Little God. It's a strange chapter, a strange name for a chapter, and I added it because I had this character in the book called the muse, the dead muse. And the muse is, of course, nothing more than my inspiration, right? I mean, I wax poetic and whimsical when I talk about the muse, and I say like the poets of the old days, thinking about the Greek or the Roman muses, whispering at them in their ears. But there is something very strange that occurs when, for people that do creative stuff, almost everybody that I've ever known that does creative stuff has this occur where you seemingly kind of get in the flow, and then you reach a point where you just can't do anything wrong. Everything comes out just so. In my writing, that happens, and it doesn't necessarily happen while I'm writing. In fact, usually the hard effort that I make to write my prose is a labor. And it's an imperfect and an incomplete and an obscure and a broken labor. I have to go back and edit over and over again. But every so often, a lightning strike comes down from on high and blasts through my brain, and suddenly words start typing out like a ticker tape thing. And I need to scramble for a pencil and a piece of paper or something. I've even used I remember using some Loctite that I found because I didn't have anything. A Loctite and a scrap of paper, and I was dripping to try to get the words out. I was off in the desert to get the words down while they're coming, because once they pass, they're gone. One of the most poetic examples of that I remember was the story that I heard of a young woman that was a writer in the 19th century, and she would describe how the same thing, how her inspiration would come like a flash. For her, she wasn't a flash. She described one incident that she described. She was out in the fields working with her father, and she could feel the words coming across the landscape like a wind. And she dropped her tool and ran back to the house as fast as she could, up to her room to grab her pen and paper, because she knew that if she didn't start writing while the words were coming, that they would pass like the same aforementioned wind and just go off somewhere else. And that is exactly what it's like for me too, and for many others. I've read this account so often, especially with writers, especially poets, where the words are suddenly there. If you write them down, you got them. If you don't, you lose it. And so in my book, I have whole sections called the Notes from the Muse. So there's two broad categories of writing in the book. There's the standard prose, and then there's the muse stuff. And basically the muse stuff, the poetic kind of stuff, and it's in italics. That stuff's all in italics. Anything that's in italic is a lightning strike from the muse. Anything that's in standard, just non-italic text, that's me trying to provide filler, to provide a sense of continuity and a story flow for the whole thing. It's probably about equally 50-50 of each. If I had just stuck with the muse strikes, then this would have been a book of poetry, so to speak. But I recognized that there was a story being told in that. There were episodic elements in the chapters, which I call sections, in the sections that were laid out here. And if I could brute force some prose to provide the connective tissue, I could create a body of sorts out of it and a story of sorts out of it. And that's exactly what I attempted to do. That is the end result. And boy, was it a lot of work to do. So the muse strikes then were a mystery to me, because I could not figure out how they were happening. Because the most interesting thing about them, two most interesting things, the one is the way that they come as a lightning strike. The second thing that's interesting is how they're, if I do say so myself, they're perfect every time. They are like crystalline, perfect every time. The words, the structure, the grammar, okay, I might have a typo or two. Once I might misspell a word once or two, I have to fix that, but that's even very rare. Which is a startling mystery to me, because my standard prose, when I sit down and I'd say, okay, Kurt, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a chapter, and I do that, that is a laborious, difficult thing to do, and it's fraught with error and needing of revision, years of revision. I mean, it took me 3 years to write this, and then it took me another 5 years. I'm still editing the damn thing today. It's been since 2018, so it's a constant thing, but the muse strikes never. They're like locked in crystal, the first strike. So it was kind of a mystery to me, and I know the answer. I know the answer simply is that it's this way by virtue of the fact that I was writing that under the influence of some sort of a conspiratorial element of circumstance and mind flow and thinking, and it was just the perfect moment. It was the perfect storm, I guess. And so all the requisite pieces were in place at that moment. But still, I couldn't help but wax a little bit think thoughtful. I mean, what do I do? What do I say? I'm distracted by there's something going on over there. I couldn't help but also think that there was something going on here, and I couldn't help attribute it to something that appears to be supernatural. So I invited a couple of supernatural elements in. First, I gave the muse kind of a ghost-like appearance, imagining it haunting the landscape of Siberia, imagining it flying through the darkened desert as I approached Siberia on the motorcycle, picturing the muse like a ghostly figure following me back from the desert to spend 3 weeks with me. Here in civilization, which rarely happens. It's rare that I get those words here, but it did happen for a 3-week period of time. So I couldn't help but build a little story out of that. The other part that I couldn't help to do was to invoke the august image of God into the whole thing, right? Which I'm a non-believer. I don't believe in God or gods. Yet I couldn't help but begin to somehow merge the muse into a god, and since I'm such a skeptic, I decided that my god was a non-existent god, and therefore by virtue a little god, a god that could barely exist, because I don't provide any weight to it. So my idea here is that the gods that we have in our lives, that humanity has created, are formed of our own imagination and supported by our belief and our credulity. And if you are one who is faithful and believing and credulous, then that God is a big God, a worthy God, a capital God of sorts. But if you're somebody like me who is doubtful and skeptical and scoffing in many ways at such an idea, then such a God can only exist as a very small thing, if at all. So my God doesn't exist for all intents and purposes, although in my mind and in the book, and especially when I was deep in the desert, I would sometimes picture the little nugget of a little god maybe following me along in the desert, something similar to the muse perhaps, but not quite the same, and gaining its sustenance from my temptations to believe. So that is my little god, and so I give it a lowercase g because it's not a capital God, it's a little god. And I decided to create a chapter for it called My God is a Little God. And it's about 3/4 of the way through the book. It's after the Good Life chapter, where I basically reconcile my vulnerability to such thoughts and then give them credence by virtue of dedicating a whole chapter of sorts to it, although it's not a very big chapter. Let's find it. and then we'll read it. It's way here in the back. There it is. Okay. Now, it's more than 3/4. It's like near the end of the book. I think it's like almost the last chapter. My God is a little God, and you can see there it is right there. It's opens, it's got the little subtitle there, and it's got a quote there. I'll read that quote. And this is an illustration that my daughter made. It's a cave out in the desert that I call the home of faith. And the reason I call it, it's a cave and I call it the home of faith, is that faith is, to me, I don't view faith as a virtue. I view it as a sin in my worldview. Faith is belief founded upon belief, right? Where we decide that we're not going to do the hard work of providing supporting infrastructure for our belief. We're just going to take a fast track and just say we're going to believe by virtue of our willingness and our wish to believe, and we're going to call that virtue, and that's enough said of that. To me, to my mind, that's very similar to withdrawing from the light into a sheltering cave where we can retreat further into the darkness and the peace that you can find beyond. But it is a withdrawal. And so I asked Emily to create that image for me to do that. And in fact, I've never told anybody this. I did take a god of sorts and leave it out in a cave in the desert out there. So I did mention here in the book how there's a place where you can find a secret that I left out there, and I did leave a feigned representation of such a god in the desert. Something that I brought back from Japan. The only person that knows where it is my nephew Parker, because he went out there and left it there with me, and I left a note with it too. So if you're ever out there in the deep area of Siberia, you might be able to find the god that I left in the desert, along with the note that I left there too. It'll be there for a long time. The trick is that to get there, you're taking a great risk. It's a very dangerous place to go. You could easily die if you go out there at the wrong time to do it. So I recommend you don't go there. Just let my little god live out there in your imagination. So let's go ahead and read the chapter. My God is a little God. And am I going to go back out there and get that thing to take it back to Japan with me where it came from? I might. Maybe not when I go back this time, but maybe in the future. It seems like that's where it belongs for whatever reason. Okay. My God is a little God, expecting nothing more. And here's a quote. We have not yet encountered any God who is more merciful as a man who flicks a beetle over on its feet. That's from Annie Dillard. I have come to realize that the muse I so often speak of, and which is the source and inspiration for so many of my thoughts, must be the same muse which heralds and inspires the words, music, thought, and motivation of the religious. A distinction, though, is that I apply and attribute no animating will to this contrived agency beyond the scope, breadth, force, and power of my own weak and faltering intellect and imagination. It is no wonder, then, that I neither trust my God's wisdom, guidance, or even its mere existence. My God is a little God, and can neither speak, write, argue, or even think without my own willful cooperation. So remember I said there's the prose pieces, and then there's the notes from the muse. So every chapter in the book, nearly every chapter, has a prose opening, and then you see right here, there's a section right there by my finger, notes from my muse. And everything after that is the italics. These are the muse strikes. So the rest of the chapter is all muse strikes. Okay, everything that I'm going to read from this point forward came out of my pen exactly like this, requiring no edit or change, which is astonishing to me because it's better than I can write. Notes from my muse. And I may get up and wander around a little bit as I do this. I told my little God of the desert today. He'd never heard of such a place. I admired his honesty in fessing up his ignorance. This may be one of his stronger traits. He seemed afraid to learn of the solitude in the desert, and he asked me if any gods or spirits might be found there. I told him it seemed there were none in the wastes. I didn't bother explaining. It's all wastes. And then I'll just put a little pregnant pause between each one so you know that I'm passing from one bit to the next. In the book, you can see the little sections here. There's a tilde mark, like right there. That's the mark. And I'll just put a little pause so you know that I'm going from one to the next. Caring for a very small God isn't unlike tending a young child. Both are convinced of their omnipotence and immortality, and each at times rails at the world with an impressive wrath and fury. The difference being, the child possesses an anger they can truly inflict upon the world, while my little god relies on my belief to achieve even the slightest destructive end. My little god begged me today to believe in him. I think he's become suspicious his immortality is dependent upon my belief and patronage. Did someone tell him of his contingent existence? Has he learned the root cause of his being? How very afraid he must be. I told my little god that we're going to the desert tomorrow. He seemed unsure after I explained the place carefully so as to not offend his growing sense of omniscience. I told him the desert was a place for losing what we cherish and for gaining what we fear. He nodded slowly, muttering something about the need of a temple. I suspect he'll soon be very disappointed. My little god has no sense of his ignorance, which I reckon the greater measure of his omniscience. I told my little god about the helpful muse we might meet in the desert tonight and tomorrow. He wasn't at all pleased and complained of my holding another before him. It didn't help that I explained my muse is dead and not even real. Such threats he leveled at me then. Maybe when he meets the nothing himself, he'll realize how little there is to fear. I've reached the near edge of the deep desert and, oh my, it's cold. I didn't come prepared for this, and I've still 100 miles to go before I reach Siberia and the safety of my desert camp. The sun's just now gone away, and I know the deeper cold is coming. This is scary. Just like the summer heat which has now passed was scary. Only this scary burns in a way that brings on shivers and chattering teeth rather than delirium and fatigue. I'll bundle up now as best I can and turn on the motorcycle's heated hand grips, which are a peripheral comfort. My small god is noticeably absent now. Have I perhaps been forsaken? He's been pestering me for a prayer. Maybe he thinks I'll relent in the wild. I remember writing that. I wrote that at Ludlow, the last stop before Siberia. And I'm so glad that I went out when I did, because I'm too old and weak now. I don't think I could handle such a journey anymore. Or at least I could handle the journey, but I couldn't handle the exceptional elements if something really did go bad. I was better able to do that when I wrote this, which was, 7 years ago. I've discovered my little god is afraid of the new horizon which I uncovered this weekend. Such irony that I've been hooked up with a domestic god, a deity of home and hearth, a god more comfortable behind a walled garden or a locked door than amidst the frontiers of creation. I remember using that word creation cautiously. I remember it came out, I was like, creation? Yeah, I'll keep it. My little god wants nothing of the larger world and covers his ears when I speak of the great indifference. It's no wonder he's so jealous of others. His wrath now is no surprise. I wonder how we can reconcile our difference, find peace between his small heaven and the greater universe of reality. I suspect I'll simply need to leave him at home when I go out, let him alone with his certitude and finality. Deny and protect him from the vast ignorance and reality which looms like a giant before us both whenever we step foot outside our door. And in fact, I did leave the god home when I went out. Most of the time it wouldn't be with me. I remember very, very distinctly the sense of this, and of course it's just my imagination, the sense of the little god falling behind and leaving as I rounded the corner from that more westernly approach to the Deepwater Wilderness, that scary, scary route around the corner there past that hole towards the home of faith. I know this stuff doesn't mean anything to you, but it recalls the journey for me. There are 3 ways to get to the Deepwater Wilderness, and this was the westernmost route. My little god's insistence on immortality is striking, given his additional claim to know everything. Shouldn't he understand his immortality cannot possibly survive my death unless I can find another to believe after I'm gone? My little god came to me tonight, trembling and asking after eternity. I told him I hadn't a clue and could offer no suggestions along these lines. He went away wide-eyed and perplexed. I'll bet he's going to make something up. And you know, for the most part, my little god never has. He's never made anything up. All he's ever done is pled with me to believe. Because, of course, it's all just in my head. A benefit of not believing in ghosts is that ghosts never come to scare me. Likewise, monsters, demons, and poltergeist. They all keep their distance. The supernatural seems to only haunt the willing, the skeptical mind offering seemingly infertile soil for what is not really there. My God is small because he has no ample space to live within my mind. He'd probably be a great God, capital G, if I'd only believe. He resides on a dusty and neglected mental shelf where I keep my credulity and faith, a place well illuminated with doubt to keep out the vermin. He'd be much happier on a shelf with certitude or belief, though it seems I've only enough to sustain the slightest of gods. And in fact, I do have such a shelf in my office. There is a shelf where I keep my Bible and items related to that. So I should say that's where my little God lives. Last one. I awoke past midnight, and I remember this. I remember this incident very clearly. This would in fact be a good last memory just before I die, to close my eyes and remember this. I awoke past midnight to walk barefoot through the dark, not far from the tent, just enough distance to unsettle whatever comfort had seeped in from the warmth of my sleeping bag and the safety of my shelter. I so enjoy the feeling of letting go the rope to anything sound and settled, to drift for a distance, naked and shivering in the cold, to stand vulnerable beneath a vast and seemingly eternal canopy of stars. That's why I reject my muse, those ghosts and my little god, less for the fact that they aren't real, and more for the desire to do without the false comfort their non-existence could never possibly provide. That's it. Yeah, that would be a good last thought when dying, to just remember that emptiness and till that all impressions of deity and the comfort that the false comfort. I mean, comfort is comfort, right? But I mean, it's you can even be comforted by things that are not true. I would rather not. I would rather die with a giant question mark on my face than that. Maybe my grandkids looking at it and telling Emily, why did Grandpa? What was that funny look on Grandpa's face when he died? It's because he didn't have any idea. He didn't have a clue. Emily will say. That'll be true. Okay, let's see if there's any comments before we sign off, and I'm going for a swim. Oh, let's see, there's a couple comments. Adrano Rizzo says, hi, do you have a swimsuit? Yeah, I sure do. I would like to see you in the water, please, okay? And well, no, I'm going to turn the camera off. Do you have a swimsuit? See you inside water, please, now. Wow. Really glad to catch you live. Oh, thank you very much, Taro Denga. Oh, sorry if I'm saying it wrong. Hard to read with my glasses. Thank you, Kurt. That was wonderful. You're very welcome. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to leave the camera on because I'm going to go for a long swim. I brought my swim fins. Let me show you what I got. Wow, here with my partner. Thanks. Oh, Tsuki. Hi, your partner, no less. Hi, hello, you and your partner. I've got my my swim fins here. I wear Churchills. Absolutely enjoying it. Oh, thank you so much. Yep, I got my Churchills, and I'm going to put those on, put my swimsuit on, and let me show you all the water. And I'm going to go out and body surf. So the waves are not very big today, but they're big enough. You can get in there and do it. And what I typically do is here's lifeguard tower 18 right there, and then lifeguard tower 16 is right there. I do laps. So I'll go out here in the water. Oh, these guys got a wave, maybe. I'll go out here in the water and I'll swim. I'll go out past out beyond where the surfers are, and I'll swim along the beach all the way over there to that tower, and then I'll turn around and I'll swim all the way back. Oh, there's a peak over there, all the way back to this tower, and then I'll do that maybe 2 times. We'll see. I have a lot to do today, and then I'll call it a day. And then, well, no, I won't call it a day. I've still got a lot to do. I've done so many things. It's only like 8 a.m. I've already done so much stuff this morning, but I've got to go home and clean house. And then after I clean house, then Yumiko and I need to go do our shopping. And then after that, I'm free, and I'm going to spend probably the rest of the day just reading. But with that, I'm sorry, I can't leave the camera on because I'm going to go out and I'm going to be out there for a long time. So I don't want to just leave the camera running. It's not the right thing to do. But I appreciate your interest in seeing me swim. But I'll take my shirt off. And all my life, I never would have imagined myself doing this. And I'll put my swimsuit on, and I'm going to go for a swim. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Be safe, but not too safe. Enjoy every moment. Bye-bye. Take care. Or try to do your best to enjoy them. Some of them are tough, I know. Bye-bye. Take care. Stay safe. Take care.